Think the Inquisition was Europe's top serial killer? Time to rethink that grisly body count. Buckle up. Today we're dissecting history's most infamous HR department and their actual kill stats. Let's gut the myth. The Inquisition, decked out in red robes and bad vibes, supposedly slaughtered millions, turning 16th century cobblestones into crime scenes. They made Vlad Dracula look like a cuddly intern. The legends wail. But where did this ghastly tally come from? Picture Spanish friars feverishly counting corpses like gory accountants, and you're sadly still wrong. Those nightmare figures? They usually spring from, pamphlets. Protestant writers during the Reformation had a flair for drama and zero fact-checkers. Blood-curdling broadsides made for spooky fireside tales, but the real ledgers tell a quieter story. Actual deaths from all the Inquisitions combined, Spanish, Roman, medieval, you name it, likely max out in the low thousands across centuries. That's pretty mild compared to your average medieval criminal court, which doled out death sentences like candy on Halloween. Honestly, judicial lethality ranked the Inquisition beneath town mayor with trust issues. Secular courts stoked their pyres with enthusiasm, while inquisitors mostly shuffled paperwork. If they'd really killed millions, medieval Europe would be crying for HR reforms, a killer logistics team, and a coffin shortage. So why does this myth stick around? Because nothing sells like a terrifying villain with a catchy name. Turns out the Inquisition wielded more spreadsheets than swords, an administrative nightmare, not an apocalypse. And Monty Python's Spanish Inquisition sketch? Not exactly a documentary. You're welcome. Understanding the scale of the Inquisition's actions helps clarify how its methods, such as the use of torture, were perceived. Picture every inquisitor as a medieval Bond villain, cackling behind racks and iron maidens, gleefully waiting for the next heretic to star in Whose Bones Snap First. It's the classic mental image: accuse someone of heresy, and suddenly their unwitting contestants on torture devices are us. Surely the conversation went, "You're under suspicion?" followed swiftly by, "Kindly stretch yourself on this rack, please." Here's where Hollywood and reality part ways faster than a devout monk and his secret bacon stash. Torture, for all its lurid reputation, was technically a last resort. Before inquisitors rolled out their well-oiled thumbscrews, they spent excruciating hours hunting down evidence. In fact, the only thing more torturous than the torture itself was the paperwork. Authorization was mandatory, and the protocols were tighter than a heretic's lips during interrogation. Torture wasn't some medieval free-for-all, but a bureaucratic nightmare. Honestly, if every accused heretic got the rack, Spain would have run out of rope by midweek. Most inquiries ended with scoldings, forced prayers, or penance, less Hellraiser and more time out in the naughty pew. Catholic legal tradition, as grim as it sounds to modern Netflix true crime fans, set strict limits on how long and how harsh these sessions could get. Suspects were usually grilled more metaphorically than literally, unless someone was unusually obstinate or unlucky enough to have really noisy neighbors. Even when torture was used, blockbuster confessions were rare. Inquisitors often ended up with babbling nonsense. Turns out, medieval inquisitors were more fans of paperwork than pain. Now that's true medieval torment for both the accused and the paperwork-weary inquisitor. While torture was commonly associated with the Inquisition, it's important to examine who the primary targets were. Imagine the Spanish Inquisition at group therapy, sitting in a folding chair, clutching a box of tissues, and tearfully confessing, "Nobody sees the real me. Everyone just says I'm obsessed with Jews. No one ever asks what I want." Usually, history paints the Inquisition as a one-note villain, a fanatical club with a disturbingly selective guest list focused on Jewish targets. But here's the plot twist. The Inquisition wasn't the president of the anti-Semitic fan club. It was heresy's relentless hall monitor. Sure, conversos. Those brave souls who switched from Judaism to Christianity, often under duress, sometimes with a side of torture, were definitely on the radar. But Jews weren't the only ones sweating bullets. Protestants, Muslims, witches, blasphemers, and even the odd over-enthusiastic bigamist all got their turn in the hot seat. If the Inquisition had an HR department, it would win most diverse cast of persecutees, hands down. Remember, most of the original Jewish community had already been evicted by 1492, well before the Inquisition hit turbo mode hunting down heretics. If obsessing over Jews was their sole pastime, they'd have to pick up knitting, or more likely, torturing their accountants over messy paperwork, which was arguably their second favorite hobby. And hey, this wasn't just about faith. Politics and power grabs were the secret sauce in their recipe for chaos. The Inquisition was basically the original multitasker, rooting out heresy, scrutinizing converts, micromanaging monarchic power. Talk about an overachiever's resume. So next time someone summarily calls the Spanish Inquisition a one-trick Jew-chasing pony, remember, their grim brand of equal opportunity persecution was way more inclusive than history class ever lets on. Beyond the commonly held belief about Jews being the sole focus, other groups such as alleged witches were also targeted. The Spanish Inquisition, infamous for surprise, terror, and roasting witches? Thanks to Monty Python, we all know the cardinal rule. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, except maybe the poor souls nervously auditioning for the medieval barbecue circuit. But before you envision pointy-hatted inquisitors wielding giant toasting forks, let's set the record straight. Mayaith, the enduring myth that the Spanish Inquisition spent its days turning witches into bonfire snacks, a fiery obsession rivaling Europe's most dedicated campfire enthusiasts. Surely, while the continent stirred cauldrons and fanned flames, Spain led the charge in marshmallow roasting. Spoiler alert, not even close. Inquisition-era Spain hosted fewer witch hunts than polite conversation at a medieval torture convention. The rest of Europe? Now that was a blazing hotspot. While German and Scottish courts saw every woman with a black cat as a walking fireworks display, the Spanish Inquisition mostly saved their firewood for red tape, not roasting spits. The real scorched earth policies happened north of the Pyrenees, where they asked not, who's next, but should we call the fire brigade yet? Here's the twist. The Inquisition, famous for endless paperwork, actually doubted the whole mass witchcraft narrative. Shocking as it sounds, they feared superstition more than a poorly cast spell. Official records show their busy work leaned towards heresy trials, not roasting witches. For most accused, a scolding letter was the worst they faced, not a spit roast. Punchline. Witch burning wasn't a hot trend in Spain. It was more fake news than full-blown firestorm. Bridge. For all their horrors, the Spanish Inquisition reserved its pyromania for bureaucratic burnouts, leaving the real witch roasts to Berlin or Edinburgh. In Spain, witches mostly escaped with bruised egos and maybe some lingering food envy. Accusations weren't limited to witchcraft. Cultural expressions like reading certain books or wearing specific clothes could also lead to persecution. Imagine needing a lawyer just to pick your outfit or your beach read. Today, fashion faux pas might get you roasted online, but back in pre-Inquisition Europe, clashing socks could earn you more than side-eyes. They might summon the actual authorities. Book clubs and fashionistas, beware. Expressing yourself wasn't just risky, it was potential evidence. Myth says the Inquisition chased outlandish theologians and secretive alchemists muttering over bubbling cauldrons. Reality? Their definition of heretical had more wiggle room than an Elizabethan collar. Anything unapproved, texts, textiles, even a suspicious shoelace, could invite intense scrutiny. Banned books weren't just dusty grimoires. Early sci-fi, spicy philosophy, or a cookbook cooked up the wrong way could land you in hotter water than a medieval bathhouse. And the high fashion stakes didn't stop at literature. Sporting anything linked to foreign or non-conformist communities, or heaven forbid, sandals with socks, basically painted a target on your back. Sorry, Steve Jobs, your black turtleneck wouldn't save you here. Jamming to questionable tunes or quoting the wrong poet? That banned lyric you hummed might just exile your mixtape dreams. Ordinary folks tiptoed around new trends. One misstep, and you went from avant-garde to arson kindling. True story. Some believed tying shoelaces a certain way was coded heresy. Heathen chic was definitely not a recommended look. Fast forward to now, if banned books were currency, Inquisition-era hipsters would be billionaires. Today, the worst the fashion police do is toss you on a website, not a pyre. So rock that turtleneck, flip open that dodgy paperback, and remember, your ancestors walked so you could strut. This wide range of punishable behaviors contributed to the perception that the Inquisition acted unpredictably. Fear the Inquisition? You might picture shadowy priests springing from behind curtains like medieval surprise party crashers. If so, congrats! You're in perfect sync with centuries of colorful storytelling and a few Monty Python skits. There's a myth that inquisitors prowled the continent with James Bond stealth, swooping down on unlucky townsfolk for spontaneous interrogations, torturing someone for heresy during brunch, then vanishing in a cloud of incense. Here's the kicker. The only thing less random than the Inquisition was your grandma's bingo night. In reality, inquisitorial business was delightfully, or depressingly, bureaucratic. Think mountain of paperwork rather than cloak and dagger. Each case usually kicked off when a neighbor, still stewing over a missing chicken, accused someone of heresy, or at least being a convenient scapegoat. Whimsy wasn't on the menu, red tape was. If heresy hunting were any more scheduled, you'd get a Google Calendar invite. There were investigations, interviews with a nosy crowd in attendance, and meticulous records. The Inquisition didn't just strike wherever they fancied, they targeted communities known for religious dissent. Surprise? Let's just say some towns had waiting lists. Your torture appointment is sadly postponed until Michaelmas. Please bring 2 forms of ID. So much for rampaging terror squads. Most of the public's fear came from rumors, not raids. To dodge the Inquisition, you just needed to avoid looking suspicious. Or maybe think twice before borrowing eggs. The takeaway? While the Inquisition's paperwork might have been suffocating, its spooky reputation is mostly fiction. Yes, the threat was real, but the drama was mostly administrative. Despite this apparent unpredictability, the Inquisition was under the close supervision of the Pope. Picture the Pope in Rome, furiously rewriting emails to the Spanish Inquisition. Subject: more torture, less napping. If you believe Dan Brown and late-night documentaries, you'd think His Holiness wielded a master spreadsheet of heretics. Color-coded torture schedules, torture-to-prayer ratios, and a daily pop-up reminder. Don't forget the holy water. The legend has it, he personally oversaw every singed toenail and every crank of the rack, moderating the pyres between sips of espresso. Or was it holy water? Here's the pew-peeling truth. The Pope set the guidelines and then promptly delegated like an overworked CEO, avoiding a reply-all debacle. It was local inquisitors, not the papal Wi-Fi, that ran the show, customizing their tactics to fit hometown politics and, presumably, their favorite flavors of intimidation. Sure, Rome's seal of approval was sometimes required, but remember, this was medieval communication, carrier pigeons and parchment people. The Pope wasn't exactly scrolling through confessions on his iPad over breakfast. And if you think the Vatican ever micromanaged, know this: micromanage in Latin basically meant create more paperwork. Most reports from Spain arrived after the roast chickens, and likely the heretics, had gone cold. Inquisitors winged it, riffing off doctrine like jazz musicians, though sadly without the snazzy hats. The Pope did issue reforms eventually, mostly when local zeal turned into bad press or genuine papal migraines. But on most days, the Vatican preferred plausible deniability. Keep the rules fuzzy, fingers clean, and let local teams field their own customer complaints. Imagine the disaster if the Vatican had run the Inquisition on Slack. Endless #innocent mistakes channels and unread DMs. In the end, Rome's involvement was less Big Brother and more checked-out middle manager. Holier than thou, yes, but definitely not hands-on. Understanding papal control provides context to the eventual decline and disappearance of the Spanish Inquisition. Blink and you'll miss it. The Spanish Inquisition, that infamous tribunal of terror, supposedly folded up and vanished centuries ago. Or did it? Most folks imagine the Inquisition dissolved quietly, like your favorite socks after laundry day. Slipped away, never to be seen again. The romance of mysterious vanishings! But buckle up, because the truth is less magical, more, let's say, bureaucratic. Contrary to popular belief, the Inquisition didn't just poof out of existence with a puff of incense in the Middle Ages. Nope, it kept plugging away until 1834. That's right. While Charles Darwin was prepping his voyage and Beethoven was composing bangers, Inquisitors were still busy running their aging, painfully inefficient show. The Inquisition lasted so long it practically had its own retirement plan, and when it finally called it quits, it didn't vanish. It just rebranded as old, weird paperwork, leaving behind mountains of detailed records for future historians to sift through and, let's be honest, occasionally nap on. Think those dusty files would finally bury the Inquisition for good? Not a chance. The legend just mutated into jokes, tropes, and of course, Monty Python sketches, because nothing says immortalized quite like becoming absurd comedy fodder. Meanwhile, the Inquisition's knack for suspicion and conformity seeped into the European mindset, stubbornly lingering like that mysterious smell in your fridge. Unwelcome, confusing, and impossible to ignore. So next time someone tells you the Inquisition disappeared without a trace, remind them, even socks don't vanish that mysteriously. And hey, at least when you fold laundry, you're not likely to find medieval torture manuals.